My sister Sophie sneered at me during her wedding, pointing at my seat near the restroom. "That's where you belong, Clara, the forgotten one." I sat there in silence, heat burning behind my eyes, while everyone laughed. They didn't know I had signed the $50,000 loan that funded her entire fairy tale night. They didn't know she had begged me on her knees, promising me family loyalty. And they definitely didn't know I slipped in a clause she never read. So when she fled the country, laughing with her husband, the debt collectors didn't come for me. They went straight to our mother. My name is Clara Bennett, and if you had asked anyone in my family who carried the weight of our lives, the answer would have been obvious: me. After my father died when I was 16, the responsibility of keeping us afloat landed squarely on my shoulders. My mother fell into a haze of grief that lasted years, and in that fog she leaned on me for everything: bills, chores, the emotional labor of keeping the household running. While my friends studied for college entrance exams, I was waiting tables and tutoring kids after school, and when a scholarship letter with my name on it arrived in the mail, my mother tore it open, scanned the words, and said, "We can't afford to lose you, Clara. Who will pay the mortgage if you leave?" So I stayed. I folded away the dream of studying literature abroad, replacing it with night shifts and quiet tears in the bathroom where no one could hear. Sophie, my little sister, was only 9 then. I remember brushing her hair in the mornings, packing her lunches, making sure her clothes were pressed. I told myself I was doing it for her, that if I gave up my dreams, at least she'd have hers, at least she'd have a better life. That thought became my lullaby on sleepless nights. But sacrifices have a way of twisting. The more I gave, the more they took. Every paycheck I earned as a young teacher went straight into the family pot: mortgage, groceries, Sophie's extracurriculars. I paid for her ballet lessons, her piano teacher, the braces she wanted because her friends had them. By the time Sophie turned 18, she was everything I wasn't: elegant, graceful, spoiled. And I was everything she despised: the woman in sensible shoes, forever tired, forever giving. It wasn't that I resented her at first. I wanted her to shine. But as she grew into her 20s, I noticed something shift in her eyes whenever she looked at me: pity, disdain, a smug awareness that I was the stepping stone she stood on. She was 27 when she introduced us to Nathaniel Price, tall, confident, the kind of man who carried wealth the way others carried cologne. His handshake was firm, his smile expensive, and in that moment, I realized Sophie wasn't just marrying a man. She was marrying into a new class, a world where teachers like me were invisible. The night she announced their engagement, our mother clapped her hands like a girl herself. Finally, one of my daughters will make something of herself. She didn't even glance at me. I felt my chest tighten, but I swallowed the words pressing against my lips. It got worse. At dinner one evening, when I mentioned that I couldn't attend Sophie's bridal shower because of parent-teacher conferences, Sophie laughed. "A teacher's salary and still no life. Pathetic, Clara. Don't worry, we'll manage without your grand contributions." Her friends giggled, Nathaniel smirked, and my mother scolded me, not her. "Clara, don't embarrass us at the wedding. This is Sophie's time to shine." Those words stung deeper than any insult Sophie had thrown at me. Don't embarrass us. As if I were the family's dirty secret, something to hide behind glittering gowns and rented chandeliers. I excused myself from the table, my face burning, but not from shame, from something sharper, a flicker of resolve I hadn't felt in years. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought of every sacrifice I'd made, every chance I had surrendered. I thought of Sophie's laughter at my expense, of my mother's dismissive wave when I tried to explain my exhaustion, of the constant reminder that I was the one who stayed, the one who gave, the one who mattered least. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't just ache. I didn't just bend. A different thought curled inside me, quiet but alive. What if I stopped being the stepping stone? What if I became the wall she crashed against? I could almost hear the audience in my head asking, "If it were you, would you keep forgiving? Or would you finally let them feel the weight of everything they had piled on your back? I closed my eyes, replaying Sophie's voice dripping with mockery, my mother's casual cruelty. A lifetime of sacrifice pressed against me, but instead of crushing me, it shaped something sharper. I didn't know it then, but that night was the first crack in the foundation of our family. The crack I would one day split wide open. The morning Sophie came knocking at my apartment, her mascara already smudged as if she had practiced the performance in a mirror, I knew I was about to be asked for something. She collapsed onto my couch, sobbing, clutching my hand so tightly her diamond ring cut into my skin. "Clara, please, you have to co-sign this loan for me. $50,000. That's all. It's for my dream wedding. Family sacrifices for family. Haven't you always done that?" The words dripped with a false sweetness, every syllable carefully rehearsed. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, my phone buzzed. It was Mother, her voice sharp as a knife the moment I answered. "Clara, don't make this difficult. Your sister deserves a wedding worthy of her new life. Don't ruin this for her." Within hours, the pressure intensified. Aunts, uncles, even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages. "Be supportive. Don't be selfish. You're the big sister. It's your duty." Their chorus of guilt weighed on me, but somewhere beneath the heaviness, I felt a strange calm. I stared at the loan contract Sophie slid across the table, her red nails tapping impatiently, and then I smiled. I signed my name with a flourish, but before handing it back, I added one subtle line, tucked neatly in the fine print. Sophie never even glanced at it, too busy beaming at her reflection in the window, already imagining herself in white silk and glittering jewels. The wedding came sooner than I expected, a grand cathedral draped in roses, chandeliers glowing like captured stars, a string quartet filling the air with soft music. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tuxedos, their laughter echoing through the marble hall. And me? They placed me at a small table in the back, next to the restroom. The air reeked of bleach and perfume. Every time the door swung open, a burst of awkward laughter followed me like a curse. I tried to eat in silence to keep my head down, but Sophie wouldn't allow that. She swept past my table, pausing dramatically so her friends could hear. "This is my sister Clara. She's basically my unpaid babysitter. Without her, I wouldn't have survived growing up." She laughed, the kind of laugh meant to sting, and her friends joined in, glancing at me with pitying smiles. Heat crawled up my neck, my fork clattering onto the plate. For a moment, I thought I might cry right there, but instead, I forced my lips into a smile. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them all laugh. None of them had read the contract. When the music swelled for the couple's first dance, I excused myself and stood near the doorway, watching Sophie twirl in Nathaniel's arms, radiant under the spotlight. Mother dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, whispering to a guest about how proud she was. Not once did she glance at me. I might as well have been invisible, but invisibility has its uses. Weeks passed after the wedding. I returned to my classroom, grading essays late into the night, sipping cold coffee in my tiny kitchen. Then, one evening, a call came from the bank. Sophie and Nathaniel had missed their first payment. I wasn't surprised. 2 weeks later, another call confirmed what I suspected. They had left the country. No forwarding address, no word, nothing but laughter echoing across social media posts of their new adventure abroad. I might have endured it, swallowed the humiliation again, if not for the video. A mutual friend accidentally left her phone recording during a video call. Sophie's voice rang through my speakers, shrill and triumphant. "Can you believe Clara actually signed it? She's so gullible. Honestly, we should send her a thank you card for funding our honeymoon." Nathaniel's laugh followed, rich and cruel. "She'll be chained to that debt for years while we live like royalty." I sat in the dark, the glow of the screen burning into my face. Their laughter filled the room, curling around me like smoke. My hands trembled, not from sadness this time, but from a cold, steady fury. I leaned closer to the screen, whispering so softly it was almost a secret between me and the shadows. "You have no idea what you just triggered." The fine print, the overlooked clause, the trap they had stepped into without even noticing. It was all waiting. And soon, the debt collectors wouldn't be knocking on my door. They'd be knocking on someone else's. The first call from the collection agency had been manageable, just a warning. The second was sharper, demanding. By the third, I could hear the threat beneath the polite language. Pay, or we'll make sure your life unravels. I sat at my kitchen table, the loan documents spread before me, my fingers tracing the fine print like a rosary. My heart beat hard, not with fear, but with the pressure of time. They were closing in. That was when the knock came. I opened the door and froze. Standing there was a tall man in a tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed back, his briefcase tucked under one arm. He looked like someone out of a magazine ad for success, but his eyes, soft, warm, familiar, made me blink twice. "Clara Bennett?" he asked, though his lips curved as if he already knew. "Yes," I said cautiously. "I'm Julian Cross. We went to high school together." The name jolted something loose inside me. Julian Cross, skinny, awkward Julian who used to sit in the back of math class, stammering when called to the board. The boy who'd confessed once, in a whisper, that he couldn't afford a tutor, that he'd probably fail his scholarship exam. I had helped him, late afternoons in the library, walking him through equations until his hands stopped shaking. And now here he was, standing in front of me, every inch the polished attorney. "Julian?" I breathed, half in disbelief. His smile widened. "You look exactly the same, except stronger. I suppose life hasn't been easy." He glanced at the papers on my table, then back at me. "I know about Sophie. I'm here because I represent the bank." My stomach tightened. "The bank? Of course." "So you're here to collect?" He shook his head. "Not exactly. I'm here because I saw what you did in the contract, and it was brilliant." I blinked at him, my mind racing. He pulled out a copy of the loan agreement, tapping at the small clause buried deep in the fine print. If the primary borrower defaults and cannot be located, the obligation extends to immediate family members before co-signers are held accountable. It's airtight. Technically, you're shielded, for now. But your mother, on the other hand. He let the words trail off, watching my face. A strange mix of emotions churned in me. Guilt, relief, vindication. For so long, my mother had piled her burdens onto me, demanded I carry Sophie's dreams on my back. And now, finally, the weight shifted. Julian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Clara, I remember you. You helped me when no one else bothered. You saved me from failing. I've never forgotten that. I want to help you now." For the first time in weeks, something warm unfurled in my chest. Not triumph, not bitterness, just the quiet recognition that someone saw me, remembered me, valued me. My throat tightened as I whispered, "Thank you." But warmth couldn't erase reality. Within days, the phone rang again, this time at my mother's house. I wasn't there, but I could imagine it. Her sharp intake of breath, her panic as the collector explained that she, not I, was now liable for Sophie's debt. The shouting that must have followed, the slammed phone, the realization that the favored daughter had left her holding the bag. When I visited a week later, the house was in chaos. Bills piled on the kitchen counter, mother pacing in circles, her face pale with rage and fear. "Clara," she hissed, "you fix this. You always fix everything." I met her gaze, steady for once. "Not this time, Mother. This isn't mine to fix." The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. News traveled fast, faster than Sophie probably realized. Nathaniel's wealthy family caught wind of the loan default, the missing money, the whispers of fraud. The engagement that had been Sophie's ticket to high society shattered overnight. Nathaniel's parents released a statement to their circle, cutting ties completely. And Sophie, wherever she was, must have felt the ground shift beneath her perfect shoes. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something other than the quiet satisfaction curling inside me. But as I stood in my mother's kitchen, the old wallpaper peeling behind her, her eyes wide with desperation, I felt taller than I had in years. For once, I wasn't the one being diminished. I wasn't the one being told to shrink. Julian's words echoed in my mind. Brilliant. I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin. For the first time, I stood straight, not bowed beneath their demands. And though I said nothing more, a question seemed to hover in the air, unspoken but sharp. If I could turn the weight of their greed against them once, what else might I be capable of? Long before Sophie ever showed up at my apartment with mascara-stained cheeks and trembling hands, I had known this day would come. I wasn't blind to her patterns. She had always taken what she wanted, believing the world, and I would bend to her. What she didn't know was that I had stopped bending years ago. Quietly, in the evenings after grading papers, I studied. Not novels or lesson plans, but legal handbooks, contract law, financial liability. I scoured case studies online, taught myself the language of loopholes, and practiced writing clauses until they looked as natural as breathing. By the time Sophie begged for the loan, I was ready. The trap was never an accident. It was a net I had woven thread by thread, waiting for her greed to tangle itself inside. Julian sat across from me one evening in a quiet cafe, the contract spread between us. He tapped the fine print again, eyes gleaming. You knew she'd do this. You expected it. I didn't deny it. She always does. The only question was when. He leaned back, regarding me with a mix of admiration and something darker. You were smarter than all of them, but Clara? I need to tell you why I'm helping. His voice lowered, almost a confession. Do you remember high school? Do you remember Sophie? Of course I did. Sophie, even as a teenager, had been cruel. She mocked Julian for his thrift store shoes, called him Charity Case Cross loud enough for everyone to hear. She tripped him in the hall once, sending his books scattering, laughing when he flushed scarlet. I remembered standing beside him, gathering the books while Sophie smirked. Back then, I had defended him, but it hadn't mattered. Sophie had been merciless. Julian's jaw tightened as he spoke. She humiliated me every chance she got. I swore I'd prove her wrong. And now, he gestured to his suit, the title on his business card. I have, but I'm not satisfied just standing tall. I want her to feel what I felt, to know what it's like to be powerless. I stared at him, stunned. The weight of it settled between us. This wasn't just my revenge anymore. It was his, too. Two paths of pain converging on the same target. For a moment, guilt flickered inside me. Was I using him, or was he using me? Or were we simply allies forged by shared scars? The cafe lights reflected off the contract like a secret pact. I whispered, almost to myself, "This isn't just about money anymore, is it?" Julian's smile was sharp. "No, Clara, this is about justice." And with that, the past and present braided together, binding Sophie tighter than she could ever imagine. Word spread quickly. Relatives who had once praised Sophie for her beauty and charm now whispered behind their hands. "Did you hear? The Bennetts are drowning in debt!" Invitations to family dinners dried up. Old friends stopped calling. The Bennett name became a punchline in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Sophie and Nathaniel's dream abroad cracked like glass. Their accounts were frozen under suspicion of fraud. Landlords demanded cash up front. Friends who once adored their lavish lifestyle vanished when the money stopped flowing. Sophie had spent years laughing at my modest apartment, my second-hand clothes. Now she was the one hiding in cheap hotels, terrified of every knock at the door. Back home, Mother's desperation only grew. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her hands trembling as she clutched the phone bill. "Clara, you have to fix this. You always fix everything. You're the responsible one. Don't let this family collapse." Her words struck a familiar chord, one I had heard all my life. I looked at her, the woman who had chained me to sacrifice, who had praised Sophie's every step while dismissing mine. My chest ached, but not with love, with exhaustion, with clarity. Memories crashed over me. Sophie laughing at my pathetic teacher's salary, mother's scolding to not embarrass us, the years of being invisible, useful only as a shield. The ache twisted, sharpened until it no longer hurt. It steadied me. I met her eyes, my voice low, steady. "No, Mom. This time you fix it." She flinched as if I had struck her. Silence filled the kitchen, thick and final. I turned away, leaving her with the bills, the calls, the wreckage of her own favoritism. And in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge. It was liberation. The girl who once sacrificed everything was gone. What remained was a woman who had learned to let others drown in the consequences they created. The unraveling began quietly, then all at once. Nathaniel's wealthy parents, once so eager to parade Sophie as their future daughter-in-law, issued a curt statement through their attorney. "The Price family has no further association with Sophie Bennett." Just like that, the glittering dream Sophie had clung to dissolved. The doors of luxury she thought had opened for her slammed shut, one after another. At first, I expected Nathaniel to stay, if only out of pride. But pride, I learned, is a fragile thing when tied to money. Within weeks of their accounts being frozen and creditors sniffing at their heels, Nathaniel vanished. Rumors swirled. He had boarded a plane alone, leaving Sophie with nothing but a single suitcase and the wreckage of their so-called marriage. The whispers grew crueler with each passing day. Former friends mocked her online. The scam bride. The gold digger who couldn't hold on to her prize. Invitations evaporated. Employers turned her away. People she once dismissed as beneath her now avoided her entirely, unwilling to be tainted by association. The girl who once laughed at me for being invisible was now invisible herself, but in the worst possible way, forgotten, discarded, despised. I should have felt pity, but pity is a luxury I no longer offered freely. Then one night, as I prepared lesson plans at my desk, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. "You don't know everything about Sophie. She's hiding something even from you." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Nathaniel, the coward who had run, now reaching back through the shadows to deliver one final blow. What secret could Sophie possibly still be keeping? For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt uncertainty slip under my skin. While Sophie's world collapsed abroad, the earthquake at home struck just as hard. My mother, desperate to appease the collectors, was forced to sell our family home. The house that had stood for generations, filled with photographs, worn carpets, and echoes of my father's laughter, was listed publicly, sold at a fraction of its worth. I watched her hand over the keys with shaking fingers, and though a part of me mourned the loss, another part whispered, "This was never really my home. It was my prison." In the wake of the sale, something unexpected happened. Aunts who once scolded me for being difficult, uncles who had praised Sophie's charm, now turned their eyes toward me with quiet shame. One cousin said softly, "We should have seen how much you sacrificed, Clara. We should have thanked you." Their words did not heal the years of neglect, but they pierced through, offering something I had never received before: acknowledgement. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The calls from Sophie began soon after. At first, I ignored them, but the third time, I answered. Her voice was ragged, trembling with a desperation I had never heard before. "Clara, please, please forgive me. I didn't know it would turn out like this. I thought Nathaniel and we had a plan. I was stupid. I was cruel. But I need you. I need my sister." Her sobs crackled through the line, but I held the phone steady, silent. She begged again. "You're the only one left who can help me. Please, Clara, for the baby." The words landed like a stone in my chest. Baby. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sophie filled it with frantic explanations. "I'm pregnant. I didn't want to tell anyone, not even Nathaniel, because I thought it would scare him away. But now, I don't know what to do. You can't let me go through this alone. Please. Think of the child. My fingers tightened around the phone. In an instant, the game shifted. It wasn't just Sophie anymore. It was an unborn life tangled in her chaos. My anger warred with something softer, something dangerously close to the old Clara who sacrificed without question. I closed my eyes, torn between the ghost of the sister I once wanted to protect and the woman who had destroyed everything. For years, Sophie had used family as her shield, her excuse, her weapon. Now she wielded it again, but this time with stakes far higher. My lips parted, but no words came. The weight of her revelation pressed down, heavier than any debt. And somewhere beyond the silence, I could almost hear the world asking, "What will you do now, Clara?" For days after Sophie's call, her words haunted me. "I'm pregnant. Think of the child." They echoed in the quiet hours of my apartment, whispered between the tick of the clock and the rustle of papers on my desk. I found myself staring out the window at night, remembering the small girl Sophie once was. The one who clung to my arm after nightmares, who begged me not to leave when I wanted to chase my own dreams. Somewhere along the way, that child had hardened into someone I barely recognized. But was it my responsibility to save her? Julian noticed the shadows under my eyes. He found me sitting in the library after school one evening, stacks of ungraded essays untouched before me. "You don't have to carry her anymore, Clara," he said gently, sliding into the seat across from me. "I know," I whispered, "but knowing doesn't stop me from feeling." He studied me, his gaze steady. "That's what makes you different. That's why you're not like her." "But difference doesn't mean you must destroy yourself for her." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Maybe I deserved better all along. It was the first time I had ever said it aloud, and the words felt like a key turning in a locked door. For so long, I had convinced myself that my worth was measured by what I gave away. Now, for the first time, I considered the possibility that I was worth keeping something for myself. News of Sophie trickled in through fragments, distant cousins, old family friends, even whispers online. She and Nathaniel were finished, the divorce unofficial, but absolute. He had abandoned her in a foreign country, and she was left scrambling for food, shelter, anything to survive. The glamorous clothes she once flaunted were pawned, her laughter turned bitter. Even the child she carried, the innocent life she had tried to use as leverage, became another burden she could not shoulder. Part of me ached for that baby. But I also knew that every choice Sophie made had brought her here. Every selfish act, every cruel word, every betrayal. For once, she could not shift the weight to me. At home, Mother's regret seeped into every corner. The house was gone, the family fractured. She called sometimes, her voice subdued, stripped of its old authority. "Clara," she said once, "I see now how wrong I was. I should have treated you differently." I listened in silence, not cruel, not forgiving, simply detached. Her words were too late. Regret does not erase a lifetime of choices, and I no longer had the strength to be her savior. Julian stayed close, his presence a steady anchor. We walked together after work, sometimes in silence, sometimes with laughter that surprised me in its ease. He reminded me that there was a world outside the wreckage of my family, a world where I was not invisible but seen. Slowly, I began to believe him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold across the city skyline, Julian took my hand. "Clara, you've spent your life building everyone else's dreams. Maybe it's time to build your own." His words warmed me more than any confession of love could, because they weren't a promise of rescue, they were a reminder of freedom. Sophie's downfall continued, a tragic story whispered among those who once envied her. The scam bride, abandoned and disgraced, left to raise a child in poverty. It was justice, but not the kind that left me triumphant. It was justice that left me reflective. Sometimes life doesn't need a sword. It simply lets people collapse under the weight of their own greed. Mother grew older, frailer, her regret carving lines into her face. But I did not step back into the role of caretaker. I visited, yes, but on my terms. Boundaries that once seemed impossible now stood firm. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. Standing at the threshold of my new apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor, I realized the transformation was complete. I was no longer the sacrificial sister, no longer the invisible shadow. I was Clara Bennett, teacher, survivor, woman, and I was free. I thought of Sophie then, and the baby she would bring into the world. A pang of sorrow touched me, but it passed quickly. I could not save them. I could not undo the choices she made. And that was all right. As Julian joined me, laughter in his eyes, I smiled softly, whispering the words that had lived unspoken for too long. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about finally choosing yourself.